Welcome to Imperative Ministries Business and Spirituality Podcast. In each episode, we discuss matters of spirituality and how they relate to the world of business. Since people are comprised of mind, soul, and spirit, we will also take a look at subjects such as mental and physical health. Thank you for joining host Michael McIlwain as he interviews people whose life experiences provide an opportunity for learning and inspiration.
And there in its circle, while flowers did grow, bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Tell other people that Jesus loves them so. Tell them how he came to earth and died to set them free. And bloom where you are planted, wherever that might be.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is good to have you back this week for our Business and Spirituality podcast. We've had some great guests on the last few weeks. The Lord has been sending some great people here, and some are strictly business people that have a spiritual element. Others have written, like today, our guest, Bruce Pagano, has written a book dealing with the love of God and the commandments, what God has given, the three commandments of God's love. And Bruce, I'll just will say we're so glad to have you with us today. It is a delight. I had been with Bruce and I had been classmates in a class for church planting, and well, I ended up not planting. I actually ended up helping revitalize the church, and so
which is super awesome.
Yeah. So what's happening in your world today, Bruce?
Actually, funny. Like, first, it's a pleasure to be here. It's I'm really thankful for you reaching out. Anytime I get to talk about my book, I'm super excited about that because it's a long time in the making. I think it took me 7 years to finally pull the trigger and publish. But the stuff in there has been a thing for me when it comes to church planning and like missional movements and stuff like that for a long time. So it's just, today is actually, we have our discipleship core meets on Thursdays, and we're recording today. And today is our first official walking through our missional movement plant conversation. So like today's the day that we're talking about our church that we're starting, that really we've been doing for a while now. We're just giving some framework to it, is called Alelon, which is Greek for one another. And so our Alelon communities is community is what we're kind of branding ourselves, calling ourselves. So our first official, quote unquote official meetings today. So
that's awesome.
Super excited. So that's what I've been doing, in addition to a ton of other stuff. Like, my wife's getting ready to test for her midwifery certification, so she'll be a midwife.
Awesome.
Right after our course, I went full-time into private practice mental health counseling, which has been going really well. And
I'd love to have you back as a time to, that's a passion of mine that more people need to do. I struggle with anxiety, and I found out a bunch of people in my family do. And I found out, and I tell people, because so many people, especially in the deep South, think it's unspiritual to take meds. So I say, hey, this makes a difference in my life. The word of God makes a problem.
The last 2 years has kind of, if you had any question as to whether or not you struggle with anxiety, the last couple of years will have pulled that out.
Yes,
and,
it will.
Compounded that. So
that was just me being a little nervous, and I was having panic attacks, and it's like, and I think it's one of the reasons I had lost 50 pounds and I've gained a lot of it back is I don't think the medicine made me eat. I think I'm just not anxious a lot. Right. So I wasn't eating because I was just,
because you were anxious.
I was just anxious, and I just couldn't eat. And so now, but after I had this, I was telling Bruce before we came on the air that I had my good knee, I have an arthritic right knee, for 20 years. And this good one started acting up. And I'm like, what's up? I didn't feel it pop, and began to realize that a tight hamstring can actually pull on the knee ligaments and do all kinds of stuff. And today I was feeling awesome. I'd been doing stretches, and the Lord just had really answered my prayers there about that. So I wouldn't have to go to an orthopedic doctor. And I get off a piece of equipment there, and I twist it a little funny, and it popped a little. Right. It's a little sore now, but it's we'll ice it down before I go make some sales calls. And
yeah.
But we'll, like I said, this is a strange season in a lot of ways. But I keep reminding the people in my church that God is at work, and your book, like I say, deals with the theme in 1 John 4:8 that God is love.
Right.
And we tend to go one or two ways with that. I've noticed that we either becomes this mushy, squishy kind of thing that God is love, and there's never any accountability in your life.
Right.
And it's not a quote original to me. I think C.S. Lewis may have said it, that God is our father. He's not our grandfather. Because grandpa will let you get away with stuff. I know my mother was that way when I sent my wife and I went to the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting about, I guess 15 years ago. And we left my daughter, oldest daughter, with my mother. And I think this was before our other kids were born. And I come back, and my mother has given her this big bag of chocolate candy, to take home. I'm like, Mom would have never bought me a bag of chocolate candy.
Right.
Never.
My son, we probably when he was 5, we were like, hey, don't give him sweets. Don't give him candy. Don't give him sweets, because he's already had some. And and we get back, and his grandpa had let him eat I don't know, half a sleeve of Oreo cookies or something like that. And we were just like, we said don't give him sweets, and he was like, I didn't give him sweets. He didn't have candy. He didn't I just gave him Oreos. I was like,
okay.
That's bread sugar. What are you talking about? The middle's actually literally sugar.
Yeah. I've been better off to give him the candy bar,
Yeah. I was like, I'd rather he had a candy bar.
He had that happen. So, but I know there's just, there's so much, angst in our world. And I will say, as I have begun to touch on this subject of how Christians should behave, and I was evaluating my ministry, and since I've been at Central Baptist, and I can say I've really rejoiced that we had a local political race that we were pushing back against some exorbitant tax things they were wanting to do. And I'll even say it was really almost bipartisan that voted against it, Republicans and Democrats and independents. And they were just asking for too much. But I was thankful I have a man in my church that was helping with that effort. And another man that really spearheaded the whole thing is a Christian, a very godly young man in his 30s. And I was just thankful that nothing ever got shrill, or nothing ever, they behaved like Christians should behave throughout this. And I've seen my people, as I've taught on this about, representing God well, that I'm beginning to see much better things on Facebook, that I'm not seeing the shrill type of stuff. I'm like, we have an opportunity to share Jesus. So your book is helpful. I wish I'd even read it before that. I had read Dan White Jr.'s Love Over Fear.
Yeah.
And the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear.
Right. There's another one, if you're interested, by Gaylord Enns, called Love Revolution.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Have you read that?
I've read it. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
I kind of wish I hadn't read it before I wrote, because I read it about 3/4 of the way through my writing, because someone was like, I was telling them about my book. They were like, oh, it sounds a lot like Gaylord Enns' Love Revolution. And there's differences, but the premise is the same, that our command as Christians is to love each other like that. And Jesus, it's one of the few times that Jesus uses the word command. And he says, hey, this new command that I give you is to love each other. That's how people know you're mine. And so he writes, the premise of his book is there's 2 commands of the new covenant, and there's 2 commands of the old covenant. Mm-hmm. And in Jesus's fulfillment of the old covenant, and his ushering us into the new covenant, he hasn't replaced those 2 commands to love God and love your neighbor. He's fulfilled them, and we get to participate in that fulfillment by the commands to believe in Jesus Christ, who is, God, or believe in my son whom I have sent for your salvation, right? So belief in Jesus is our first command, and then love each other is our second command. And those are the 2 commands that make up the new covenant. And so Gaylord kind of takes that premise and runs that way with it. And and I take a little bit different approach, but kind of the same points, if you will.
I think it's good for different voices to say the same thing. Some people are going to read your book, aren't going to read Gaylord. So I think that's good.
Right.
I do. And whether you have, like, I have this podcast that goes all over the world. Now, do I reach millions of people? No, I don't. Nope. But I do reach.
Same as my podcast. We're not reaching millions of people, but we reach 90 in Australia. Like
I have 80 consistently listen in the Cupertino, Palo Alto area of California.
That's pretty cool.
But
you're like,
do.
okay.
I mean,
okay.
That's awesome. This little church that's running less than 30 people on a regular basis. I mean, they're listening to my sermons as well as the podcast. I mean, they're tuning in every week. And then I have a few people from Germany and Italy and the Netherlands. It's just exciting. A few, it is.
Little numbers.
And but that's the thing. Jesus told us to go into all the world, but he also told us to be here at Jerusalem. And I know the thing you're talking about too is love within the family of God. John tells us later on in 1 John 4 that we love simply because he loved us.
Right.
But I liked how you treated the subject of God as love, and you quoted Tozer, and Tozer had sort of a warning, saying that be careful about this, and instead of you just blowing that off, you said, no, this is a good warning, we should listen. And but I agree that we should say God is love. He was sort of saying, well, we better be careful about that, and like with anything, we can take anything too far. I thought his points were good, but you elaborate some on that. I just thought that was your treatment of that was awesome.
Yeah. So like he makes the point that if we land on a literal interpretation of God as love, the danger in that is that we might begin to see love as the thing that we worship, which makes love an idol.
Right.
And then it pulls us away from God. And so that's his warning. And I kind of, the thing, like, because it doesn't say God is loving. The Bible doesn't say God has love. It says God is love, as opposed to like when they're talking about justice, they talk about the justice of God, or God is a just God.
Yes.
But they don't say God is justice, right? Like that's not in the Bible, that God is justice. He's a just God. He exercises justice. His focus is justice for his people. God is not wrath. Like he is a wrathful God. There is a wrath of God. And so in the biblical writers make it a point to give us this separation where it's just like, no, like we're saying that this is essence. Like God is love, as opposed to just something that he feels or has, right? The same way that Jesus is truth, the same way that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, right? Like Jesus is saying, like, look, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life.
Yes.
And so those become defining characteristics but not just characteristics, like defining essence, the very substance that makes up God is love. So that means that everything that he does is built out of that love, right? And so when he exacts justice, it's from a place of love, because that's what he is, and that's who he is. And so my thing was just like, if there's any danger in creating an idol out of love, it's because we misunderstand that interpretation, not because it's not true. That's because we awesome. Take and make the emphasis on, and I think I quote like Michael Jackson and a couple other people that are like, hey, the greatest thing is love. The greatest thing in the world is to achieve love. And that's the very warning that Tozer's giving, right? Like when you make love the ultimate and don't recognize that, it's God that is love, the danger is that love becomes the most important thing. And culture's done that. And we buy it. Like we like hook, line, and sinker, we buy it.
But some well-intended Christians would sometimes read Tozer, okay, well then, because I had a pastor that was a great guy, but one of the things that he would do is he did not give compliments very well. And part of it, he didn't want anyone to get puffed up. which that's good that we don't, but you still need to give some attaboys. Okay,
Right.
you just do.
Right.
Yeah. So there you go. I think we have to say
same
that
thing.
God is love.
I worked for a pastor that fantastic guy, like was my coach, was wise counsel to me. And he from the stage would say things like, my mercy meter sits at 0. And I'm just like, oh,
I've served with one of those. That's right.
but
That's
God,
not my spiritual gift. I mean, you still have to be
but
merciful.
God is a merciful God.
That's
And if
right. You have to represent
Jesus
that.
is merciful.
Yes.
And if we're following Paul, like he follows Christ, or if we're following anybody like they follow Christ, or if we're following Christ, mercy has to be one of those things.
Yes, it does.
You know,
It
compliments
totally
are a
does.
part of that, you know.
But
So,
and you've pointed out too, this is not some squishy kind of love. There is accountability in that, and I love
sure.
what you told in the first chapter about finally getting connected there with that young adult group and how you saw them living out love. And
Yeah,
we just want to say that you don't. Some people think they have to be in a big church to find what they need, or a little church. No, there's churches of all sizes are missing this, but there's some of all sizes that are getting it right. And
right. And that group, like, they loved each other well because conflict didn't tear them apart. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't, like, what I saw in their execution of trying to love each other was that they forgave well, even if it was difficult, and they had to be guided through it. That they included each other. They didn't, even in the times where it's just like, because you don't get along with everyone, and you don't connect with everyone, but like there was never a time where they were like, hey, let's do this thing and exclude so and so, like nobody call him or her. It was always just like, hey, where's Josh? Hey, where's so and so? Like, has anybody got a hold of them?
That's good.
And they were good. Like, what Jesus say is just like, even a tax collector loves his friends,
Yes, that's right.
And so loving people is easy when you like them.
That's
right. But what I got to see in that young adult group was an execution of love and a practice of love that even through conflict where it was difficult, or you may not connect well with the person, or you just, they rubbed me the wrong way, you still spent time with them and you still worked through the conflict of that. And I'm not saying it was perfect. There were people that walked away because they were like, this is too much. I don't want you that deep in my life. And they would walk away, but
that's going to happen.
But and it was the first time I'd ever seen that, like in practice, outside of a Sunday morning, you know what I'm saying? Like even outside of a small group, because, I got saved on a Sunday morning and I grew in small groups. I mean, the whole point of like the podcast I have is called Folding Chair Theology. And the whole point of that is mostly the best things that I've learned about the actual practice of following Jesus happened on a folding chair in someone's living room. Like the best theology I ever got about following Jesus happened on a folding chair, and it was in someone's, but even there were time like that young adult small group. It was the first time I'd seen it in practice in a way that was messy, but really good, and really a picture of Christ to each other. Like they were actually like practicing that new command to love each other.
We need more of that. I know that it still may not always help us like the other person. They still may have traits that we dislike, but I have a church secretary that I work with that we were very different. My ADHD just set her off. She was and she admitted, somewhat legalistic. It's got to be just this way. And I remember us sitting down together and having a conversation, and tears flowed, and we realized, and we actually worked out a plan for how to relate to one another better. We just sat down and talked. And there was apologies.
Amazing what communication does.
Yeah, just sit down and talk about it. That's why. And it's going to sound terrible, me being a pastor, but my son has been mentored well in sports, and he's had some wonderful basketball coaches. And of course, he's not as pale as the rest of my family. My two daughters are so white they're almost translucent.
That's my oldest son. Yep.
They're white.
Down to Phoenix, I was like, "You're gonna die. You're gonna burst into flames."
Yeah, my daughters can't even suntan well. That's but he's had African American men who have coached him well. And he even said, Dad, one of our coaches, yeah, he even swears some, but we know he loves us. We know he cares about us because he's getting on to us, and they want us not just to succeed on the basketball court, but in life. And I thought, well, sometimes in church, it's all this touchy-feely kind of stuff, and no one wants to, take them aside. And I've coached youth sports, and I've told the kids, look, if you're not really any good, I'm just going to pat you on the back and say, you're so precious, God bless you. But if you're really good, I'm like, hey, come here, I'm going to fuss at you a little bit,
Right.
I've actually, in a game, I've been known to throw the hat off, like, come on, but the next minute I'm building them up. It's not like I'm not tearing them down, but I'm like, hey, it was not because they couldn't do something. It's because we've done this a million times and you've done it. And so but you can't rebuke people if you don't. I know in my life, you can't come rebuke me if you don't have a relationship with me.
Right.
I'm going to probably just blow it off and say, well, you're just being negative. But if you know me, I respect you. I'm like, I better listen to that, and
yeah, kind of what you're saying, like when you were talking about, like during a game, you'd be like, you practiced this a million times and now like, what are you doing?
yes,
that made me think like, that's what I saw in that young adult group was game time. Like
yes,
that, like they're actually trying to and fumbling
yes,
what they've been taught in theory. They were trying to put it into practice and they fumbled it a lot. And it was just like, come on, guys, like, this, but so many of us spend our time in, in a Sunday morning service. And that's our primary engagement with the, Christian industrial complex.
yes.
That you mentioned in kind of
you get information, that's it.
Yeah, they're going and they're getting this information, and by Tuesday, maybe they remember it, maybe they don't, maybe it impacted them, and again, Sunday morning, really important because there are times where I'm like, oh man, that was specifically for me. And this is what God's trying to do in my life. Even if I was resistant to it, I was just like, well, I don't like God, don't take me there yet. And he's just like, nope, it's time. But like what I saw these young adults doing was trying to put into practice the thing that they were taught, and they fumbled it, and it was okay. Like it was like, oh, it's okay. We'll survive this because we have Jesus, and you guys are trying. And even as the leader, because we did pluralistic leadership in that young adult group, so there were 5 of us, but we would make mistakes and we would have to own those mistakes, and we would have to, defer to each other, and then realize, man, like if we'd have done what I wanted, it would have went probably poorly, or we did what the other 3 or 4 wanted and it went poorly, and we had to work through that.
That's right.
So yeah, it was game time, and we were in the game. Not that it's a game, but we were in the game.
No, I don't understand what you're saying. And I have discovered too, you talk about fumbling, working it out. I would go and coach these kids, whether it be boys or girls. There'd just be some days they were off. And I would get frustrated with that. Then I would go and watch a professional game, and those guys were off. I'm like, well, they're getting paid millions of dollars, and they've had the best training in the world, and they just, the quarterback throws 3 interceptions. Well, okay, I guess the kid, whiffed on 3 soccer kicks. Okay, it happens, and then and what about those wonderful moments when I'll see a kid shoot the ball and I'm like, no, shoot that ball, and this long 3-pointer goes in. I'm like, and that happens in real life sometimes too. And in ministry, we're thinking they're never going to get this or whatever. But oh, you struggling to hear me? What happened there? Hold on. Whoops. Oh, okay. I may. Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, hold on a moment. We're going to 1, 2, 3. Let me see. Okay, well, I started recording again. My microphone cut out, everybody, and you may not notice the difference because I'm going to go back and patch this up. And thank the Lord for these technology and abilities we have there. But yes, I said coaching, and some of the kids are fumbling around and struggling, but I would see, I'd go watch a professional game where people be paid millions of dollars, and that quarterback would throw 3 interceptions, or this athlete who has been trained well and has all the best athletic equipment would miss 3-point shots, like airball them. And I'm just reminded that, you're out there trying, and the best of the best fail, The Apostle Paul had his Romans 7 moment where he said, "Oh, wretched man that I am." He got some things wrong, not theologically, but just in his daily interactions with people. He had some times that it wasn't the best. And yet we look at, when Peter got legalistic and began to act better than the Gentiles, Paul called him out on it in front of everybody.
Yep.
And that's because he did it in front of everybody. So, he called him out in front of it. And there's, most of the time that's not the place to do it, but occasionally,
Right.
accountability has to be there,
He for sure had not read Matthew 18.
Right. Yes, that's right. Go to your brother first. But who knows if they hadn't already had some conversations or some hints.
Yeah, maybe.
Finally, hey, and again, that's rare, by the way, that we would do that. Most of the time, we should take somebody aside and talk to them. Call.
Yeah. And I think though that like the difference in professionals who are paid millions of dollars, fumble the ball, miss a 3-point shot, whatever, lose the game, mess it up. For me, like if we're using that analogy, and we go back to like, okay, so what's the motivating factor? Like, what's the motivation to continue? What's the motivation to press forward? Like, what's the thing that drives you forward? And for us in that context of community and being, doing body work, being it's Christ and that God is love. And so like if love is the thing that drives us forward, then we get to look at like I think it's in Matthew 6, it's definitely in the Sermon on the Mount, but where he's saying like if you realize your brother has something against you, you put down your sacrifice and you go be reconciled to him. Like that's the fruit of love. Like again, it's easy for a tax collector to love, even they love the people close to them. But when you realize that you've offended your brother, does love drive you back to them to seek reconciliation? And that's to me, that's the test and the fruit of it. Like that's love. Like that is God is love. It really, and I think maybe I mentioned in the book, but it drives me nuts when people try and parse out and separate an Old Testament, New Testament God. And they're like, the Old Testament's a really wrathful God. In the New Testament, he's matured and he's this hippy dippy, love is everything, Jesus, and I'm like, man, did you read the Old Testament or are you just guessing? Because when I read the Old Testament, what I see is God saying, come back to me. I will make every path back to me. If you don't come back to me, these horrible things are going to happen when you're separated from me. And it's descriptive, not necessarily prescriptive, like God's saying, like the entirety of the Old Testament is come back to me and be my people and I'll be your God. And the most wrathful event that we see in the entirety of the Bible is actually in the New Testament. Like Jesus on the cross is the most wrathful thing that you can see in the Bible. And that's in the New Testament, so it's not this hippie love. It's this consistent, come back to me and I will do whatever. I will make any path possible back to me because I love you and I want you to be my people so that I can be your God. I want to be your father. I want to protect you like a mother hen protects their chicks. And there's not a duplicity of character in God between the New and the Old Testament. It's this, like some of the most loving interactions. Hosea is one of my favorite books.
Yes, it's awesome.
It's one of my favorite books. And it's because in our squalor, like Hosea is the story of the prodigal. Like that's the story. It's the same story, like, except that Hosea is played out in reality. And then the story of the prodigal son coming back and living in squalor and still being put back into the family. That's love. Because it's easy to be like, nope, you're filthy. I can't.
Well, Zechariah, when he comes before he has this vision, he's offering the offering and he's in the dirty turbans and things. And the Lord's like, I've cleansed you. You
Right.
were speaking about, the God of the Old Testament. Grace is there. It's not as noticeable, but I like to preach, and I got this from the great theologian John Gill from Puritan times. He pastored, I think, Spurgeon's church or in that town 100 years before him. But Numbers 23:21, where Balaam is been hired to curse the Israelites, and of course he said, "I can only say what God's told me to say." And he says, "Behold, he has not beheld misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord their God is with them, and the shadow of a king is among them." It had not been very long ago that they had all messed up with the golden calf
Right.
incident.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Gill says, look, the Father was looking ahead thousands of years to the cross.
Right.
So God's grace was already, instead of saying, "You bunch of low down people," he's like, "Hey, I don't see any sin in these folks."
I have a friend that is a that's really good. Like I have a friend that's a Bible translator with Wycliffe.
Oh,
Smart dude, super smart guy.
Yeah.
And he said that when he was doing some study work and translative work on prophecy in the Old Testament, that there's no future tense in the Hebrew word. Like all of it's present or past tense.
Yes.
And so like when a word of prophecy was given about going into exile or about the coming king, it was spoken in present tense. And so the implication there is like, not you will be sent into exile, but you are exiled. Like the moment that God says it and gives it to a prophet to speak, it's truth.
Yes.
It's true. And so like, this coming king that they're talking about, Jesus, is like in that moment in Numbers where he's just like, look, I can only say what the Lord's told me to say. And when he mentions this coming king, the salvatory figure, or salvific figure,
Yes.
He's saying it's already here. So God's ability to forgive
Yes.
is because he's present in the moment that Christ is crucified.
Yes.
And he's like, no, like I spoke it, and it literally is already true. Like
Yes.
you don't know it, you haven't presently and tangibly experienced it, but you have a king who is sacrificed for you and who gives you up. And that's kind of like the point I try and make towards the end there is like of my book, is that like it's like it's presently true. Like it's like the command to love each other is is the thing that helps us to understand what it means to love God and to love our neighbor. And it's the fulfillment of that. And God knew that when he gave those commands. And that's the thing that Jesus is speaking on, like the whole, the name of the book is 3 Commands. And it's because, it's because though, that, we focus on, like, there's really 3 commands that are the most important. And I mean, like, if you go with Gaylord Ends, belief in Jesus is also very important.
Yes.
And a good command. But for me, like the thing I was trying to get at, the love commands, and there's only 3 of them really.
Right.
And the thing we do that we've done that I've been a part of is we plaster love God and love others on our buildings, right? They're on our bumpers.
That's right.
They're our church mission statements. And I think what we're doing when we do that is lumping believers who are in the body and unbelievers who are not in the body together as others. Like, I think that's what we're doing.
Right. Yeah.
So we're saying love God and love everyone, right? But Jesus makes a distinction.
Yes.
Like, people think when Jesus is saying, like, because I hear it all the time and I've said it, well, Jesus said that love God and love your neighbor are the 2 most important commands. So that's that's what we're going to focus on. And they missed the point that Jesus was answering a question to the Pharisees about the most important commands of the old covenant that he came to fulfill. That he says, look, I've come, like, these 2 commands, every other command of the prophets and the writing are fulfilled in these 2 commands.
Right.
And I've not come to destroy them or abolish them. I've come to fulfill them. Right. And so then he steps aside and brings his disciples over and he says, hey, this new command I'm going to give you is that you love each other, because that's how people will know that you belong to me. And he's making a very important distinction there. And kind of the way I read it is, for thousands of years, you guys have had this command to love God and to love your neighbor, and you stink at it. You really do a horrible job at it. In fact, nothing that you do around the 603 other commands that you've added to the original 10 have profited you guys. Like none of it's profited you guys for what it means to love people and to love God. And so as I grew up, I was like, really had a difficult time trying to understand, okay, so what does it mean to actually in practice love God? Because I feel like I'm not doing it. And the answers I got were, well, spend more time with them, read your Bible, pray more, be in church, the Billy Graham answers. What makes a good Christian? Read your Bible, be in church, pray. And it never landed for me. Like I never felt like, not that I never felt loved by God or experienced the love of God, but it never felt like a reciprocal relationship. It just always felt like I was trying my hardest to prove that I loved God. And so my brain, and maybe I heard it somewhere, went to, well, if Jesus said that the second is like it, then by trying to fulfill the command to love my neighbor, then I'm loving God. And so I would move towards this very works-based and try and be involved in every outreach event that we had. I would try and make sure that I was giving people, generous with people, which are all good things. They're all really important, good things. And what I found was I just became really tired and burned out. And it's the reason why people step up to the pastor and say, I need to step back for a season.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like they're so involved in the work to prove that they love their neighbor, to prove that they love God, that they burn themselves out. Because again, loving your neighbor is not reciprocal. Like there's no filling. Like I can go to a soup kitchen, feed homeless people, and they may never say the word thank you or serve me or love me. And that's not why we do it.
No,
but you can only do it for so long before you're depleted. Right.
But Jesus said that I'm going to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant,
Right.
Deep down, we know we hadn't really been all that faithful and good, but still he says that to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul says, I pour myself out like a drink offering, and then would send letters to Timothy and be like, I need you to come be with me.
Yes.
I need you to come be with me in jail. Because he needed that filling. Like he needed that person there. And so my brain went that way where I was just like, because I burned out enough times that I was like, I need to step back. And I saw people stepping back, and the back door of the church was bigger than the front door of the church, and people were just pouring out, And
I think so sometimes true believers have come out that back door. I don't think it's all unconverted people. I really don't.
No, I think that it's absolutely burned out true believers that don't understand and haven't been taught well that loving God and loving your neighbor are seen in Christ fulfilling those by creating a new covenant. Like the old covenant's fulfilled, and we get to experience, like we don't have to work at fulfilling it. We get to experience the fullness of what it means to love God and love our neighbor by participating in the new covenant, which one of the primary commands of the new covenant, because like Jesus said, I give you this new, and the word there is new, never before existed. Not like, what I'm saying, like this has never existed before. Love each other. Yeah, but Bruce, like they were supposed to love their Jewish. Nope. They were supposed to treat their Jewish brother well. They weren't supposed to charge them tax. They were supposed to help them pull their donkey out, but they could hate each other, and they did. And you see that in the class cast that they created between Pharisees and poor people, and like unclean and clean, and prostitute, and like there was no love amongst them. And so Jesus comes and says, hey, look, I'm going to give you this new command to love each other. And that if you practice this command, it will be evidence, and you will get to more fully experience what it means to love God, and you'll be better equipped to love your neighbor, to where you can come back to this community that it's reciprocal and you'll be filled. and you can learn to be loved and love in this community. And it all lands on this command. And so
Yes.
I would rather see churches plaster, love each other on their church,
Yes.
and work on, hey, what does it mean for us to build each other up in love, to do good works, which I think is biblical because it's in the Bible.
Yes, it is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, build each other up in love for good works. And to me, that is evidence. Like, what they're saying is practice Jesus's new command and you're equipped to love everybody else.
Yes.
And so that's the whole thing. Where I was just like, man, if we just got that, I think it changes the dynamic of church and the body.
Well, and that's what I was been telling my congregation over and over. And many people will nod at me when I said, look, y'all are not here to work the program. Okay. I mean, if you get wore out or burnt out, you can come talk to us and maybe we'll need to, for a season, put something on hold, so that we can be refreshed. We may need to rework something for a while, but you go to the average Christian industrial complex church and you tell the youth minister, the children's director, the nursery coordinator, you need to take a step back, they'll lose their mind, because they're already struggling to find people. And part of my thinking is, you don't need to quit doing what you're doing, but maybe you need to just for a month, go intergenerational or do something. And,
but even then, like you said, that you're trying to, like, eventually you're trying to move towards like small community groups that where they can like begin to practice living life. And I'll be honest, it takes years. Like building trust takes years, building connection takes years. And most people don't have the patience for that.
No,
you know what I'm saying? Like, why aren't things better? Well, because it's been 3 months. Like,
that's right.
Like, well, I don't trust them. Well, you've only known them for, one Thursday a week for a month and a half. Like, come on, man. You talk with them 6 times. My group's been meeting for 3 and 4 years. Like, we're, you know what I'm saying? And we're just now ready to start talking about what it looks like to actually do missional movement in church. And most churches are like, hey, we're going to plan a new campus. This team's going to be together for the next 6 months, figuring out how to do that. And that's not community. That's 100% Sunday centric. Like, you're trying to figure out how to launch another service to fill it up so that you can launch another service to fill it up. And the thing that makes me sad, you mentioned youth leaders. You tell a youth leader they need to take a step back so that they can kind of relax. They'll lose their mind. My thing is like, man, the thing that drives me crazy is when you do have small groups and your leadership don't participate in small groups.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, pastor, you're pressing the importance of, and I've been on staff.
Yeah.
And so you're pressing the importance of small groups. You're not a part of one. Yeah, but I got the staff. Your staff meeting's not growth. Your staff meeting is business.
That's right.
And you're not having dinner with your staff. You're barely having coffee with your staff. Maybe once a month you invite one of your staff members to have coffee, but usually it's the ones real close to you that you're throwing a Nerf ball in the sanctuary when you're supposed to be practicing your sermon. I don't know, it's but your staff meeting is not community.
No, it's not.
And I've been on staff enough times where it's just like the staff, it's just work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've been there.
Monday through Thursday is just work. And then Sunday is just work. And not that they don't believe what they're doing for the good of people and trying to be, true to what they feel like God's called them to. But if you see behind the curtain, it doesn't look like community. No. It looks like work and sounds like work.
The leaders aren't modeling that. How's everybody else going to get it?
Right.
I served at a church for 3 years. We shut down Sunday night once a month to do these small groups. And of course, every elder sadly didn't promote it. Some would wait too long. If somebody was late showing up, they would wait on them and they never get started, and they really didn't do much good. But we would actually have a meal, then we would actually go through the points that the pastor had preached. We would dive deeper into the Sunday morning sermon. And there's things that happened in that group that have to this day impacted me. One was a gentleman who loved the law of God, loved the scriptures. And I just remember him, he was nearly 80 years old, weeping over his experience in the Lord, and even saying how he quoted the verse, the Lord is my light and my salve, or thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And so the night he got converted, And I believe he truly got converted, through the word of God
Right.
and Jesus. But he said, my Bible literally began to glow, and I don't know if he just imagined that or whatever, but it was so real to him. And it just these different people, older and younger. We'd have, young couples in their 20s with people 80 and folks in the middle. And I just remember doing life with these people. I know I'm 54 years old now. I still have a lot to learn from the older generation, but I'm realizing it's time to speak to the younger ones. And so it's not about me,
Right.
but like I've told my congregation, I've said, listen, God's going to add new people here. Some of them are going to get on your nerves. I mean, you're not going to like their personality.
Yeah.
But part of it is loving one another. And but I can say that we have divided now into a youth, a children's, and we just have one big adult Sunday school class. But there's some real love for one another. When we all went, half the church, had COVID a few months ago, and people were messaging me. And of course, my COVID experience was I had a mild case, but it seemed like the last 8 days I was in some kind of brain fog and I couldn't shake it. I was just exhausted. But I was trying to give people numbers. I realized we need a directory now because people wanted to check on one another. And they did a good job of ministering to each other and calling each other and praying for each other. And so I was really proud of them. I was. Now I'm going to mention all that Sunday, I think, in my sermon, and I'm going to challenge them a little bit. Okay, we need to be inviting people, connecting, because in my sales job, I have learned you don't have to be overly pushy. I'm not one of those type A sales guys, but we're taking a little more mellow approach. We're not the used car salesman approach, but we are. But I'm realizing that I got to talk to a ton of people to invite them to take advantage of our services, and it's as a company, and it's the same way with the message of the gospel. You don't have to force it down anybody's throat, but you do have to bring it up. And I'm seeing some wonderful things happen out in the world. That's why I like being bivocational. I'm actually getting to share God's love with people and talk to them. And I even had this 2 people that asked me to pray for them. And one was a Catholic lady and her buddy, and prayed for their healing, for their eyesight. And she actually, one of them crosses herself, lays hands on me and prays over me. And I'm just like, well, praise the Lord. This is so encouraging. And the Christian life's just so full of wonder and adventure if we live it, but we just can't. You're right. We can't do it without love. We'll burn out. And I'm bothered sometimes when a staff member is not saying, oh, dear brother or sister, I'm so burdened for you that you're burned out. It's almost like, oh no, there's another we've lost. The program's not going to work. And I'm pressured to get more people. I've had to realize, as I'm trying to build this business and finances have been tight, God, I don't know, maybe you're going to call me back into full-time ministry. And part of me, we change that. I'm a full-time minister now. I minister in the name of Jesus, but it's vocationally. But part of me is like, just what you shared, I don't want to go back to that. Okay. I really like what I'm doing now. I really don't want to go back to that.
Yeah. And we don't have to get into the weeds of it, but like money complicates things when it comes to ministering to people in church. And I've been a part of staffs where it was just like, man, we might go bankrupt and we have staff members we have to pay. I've never been paid staff. I've just never been paid staff because I've always had another vocation. So I've always been bivocational. And actually Hugh Halter says co-vocational.
Yes, that's a better
which is for me, like, oh, there's a distinction there because I wasn't getting paid and I was choosing that, you know what I'm saying? Like, not that I wasn't offered, but I was choosing that. And but money complicates things. And I mean, like, it, whether they admit it publicly or not, like, there are pastors that will preach more about giving because they know people need to give more because I need to make bills this month. And that's sad to me. But at the same time, like, how do you do it otherwise if you're, you know what I'm saying? Like, because you have to worry about that stuff, the business end of it, you have to worry about it. I wanted to, you had said, inviting people. I just kind of wanted to touch on that. Like, I'm really convinced that the front door to the church is on your house.
Yes, you're right.
And
I received
so
that
much-
word. Okay. I do. I received
but
that.
just because I think it's so much easier to extend an invitation to a celebration gathering that takes place on a Sunday morning or a Saturday night. If you, because you mentioned it earlier, if you're in a relationship, like
That's true.
if you've created this connection with them, invited them to dinner at your house, or you had a barbecue, or, you know, whatever, but, you know, Halloween just passed, put hot cocoa and a movie on in the front yard, and,
Yes.
you know, like give people a rest stop.
Yes.
And it's easier to convince them to come to this public place, and not convince them in a way that like, you know, but it's easier to extend the invitation in this public place when they've already been
Yes.
through your front door, and
That's true.
trust that you're not trying to like stare them towards some crazy thing, or, you know, or that they're a number, or, you know, whatever,
That's true.
you know.
I think you're right. The small groups are, you know, like I say, in your home, and I think that's scary for some people, because for years they've
Sure
wanted
it
to
is.
go. I mean, you're inviting
Mhm.
somebody in your home, and they could be a little off. They could be a little
Right.
different, but
Like, you don't know.
but then again, that's the wild, exciting life we have as Christians, and we need
And it's
to embrace
like,
it.
I can't remember what pastor it was, but he was just like, throw a party. Like,
Yes.
he's like, Christians should be the most partying people in the world. And it's easier to invite someone over to a party of like 15 people than it is to invite someone over to dinner, you know.
Yes, yes.
But kind of read it a little bit. If they're like, nah, like I don't know anybody, like, no, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You want to come over for dinner? Like,
Yeah.
you want to go out for coffee? Like, maybe
Yeah.
that's a little, but I mean, like, open your front door. Open your front door. Hospitality is, yes, I know there are people that are gifted way better than some.
Yes.
There are people way better
Sure.
gifted at hospitality than some other people, but it doesn't take a lot to
No, it doesn't.
just
I,
cook a little bit extra and invite somebody, you know what I'm saying? You're cooking anyway.
Well, what ended up hindering our in that church where we met for 3 years doing this is some began to feel that they inadequate as hostesses and things, and eventually just the complaining about it got to where it died off. And after it died off, and we quit doing it, some people said, "Oh, I wish we were doing that again." And
Right.
I remember one lady said that she was originally from the Ohio area, and she had this was my church in Florida where we had all these snowbirds that moved down. She said that we lived in a double wide mobile home, and we would just set up 60 folding chairs, and this was a lady, I'm sure things weren't just trashed in the house, but she admitted there were days it wasn't perfectly neat, but we were meeting with people. That's what it was all about. The people wanted just a place to gather, and
I just want to spend time with people. Like, just spend time with people.
Well, I always thought it was good because we were all more motivated to keep the house up a little better. All of us were, and so some of it's just you might let it go a little bit, but hey, I'm bringing people in, so it's but you don't have to stress about it. If there's people that tell me all the time my house is a mess, I'm like, no, it's not. It's fine. So, but anyway, well, this is well, I want to tell people, because I got the name of didn't give the full name of the book. Would you tell everybody again the name of your book, and maybe tell us some other places, Bruce, where we can access maybe your podcast and some other things, because I want people to continue following you. Some of these folks to get connected to you.
Yep. So the book is 3 Commands: Jesus' fulfillment of the law through love, and you can get that anywhere. It's on Amazon. I would encourage you to go to a local bookstore, order it, and it puts it in their system. So that helps me.
Yes, good.
And it helps that local bookstore. But also our podcast is, me and a friend do a podcast called Folding Chair Theology, and you can, I think it's on Twitter as chair_theology, and foldingchairtheology.com. You can just go there and find it.
Okay.
All of my social media stuff, like I do some writing occasionally. It's been a while, at brucepagano.com. So just my name, but all of my social media stuff is Pags, PAGS, the number 2. All of it is Twitter, TikTok, all of it. So, and I'll send you that, and I think you said you'll put up a slide on the video.
I create a slide. I'll do that. I will leave here in a minute and have to go visit some businesses, knock on some
Yeah.
doors, and who knows, maybe tell some people about
I gotta-
Jesus in the process.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
So,
I got to do some trim today. That's what I'm doing.
I
I'm
got you. All right. Well,
trimming out
I've
the
kept you a
upstairs.
long time, and I'm glad that you've stayed
No,
with
it's been
us.
fun.
Because a podcast, I've learned that they can be 20 minutes long, they can be 3 hours long, they can be, and the Lord has blessed me that I've been able to put out an episode once a week, and I have other guests
cool.
lined up. But when I saw that you were available, I said, I've got to jump at this because, and I haven't finished the book yet. But I can tell you what I've read has already challenged me, and even Bruce here just a moment ago reminding me about things being in the front door. I've been doing that, but I got away from it. I just
the cool thing about your job is you get to walk up to other people's front door
I do
and knock, which is
get
cool.
to talk to people, and I don't always knock on the door. Sometimes I realize people hate that guy that knocks on the door, but if I hear people stirring or whatever, I'll some days it's just door hangers, but good things are happening. But thank you, Bruce, for being here, and
thank you for having me.
I'll have everything there, and I look forward to messaging you, and who knows, maybe I'll get up into that part of the world one day on vacation.
You got a place to stay if you do. Lots of mountains, hiking. So
I'll do
lots
that
of good trout fishing if you're into trout fishing.
I love to fish, and
I may have to come down there though and hit up Lake Fork because that's some good bass fishing.
Yes, and I'm like I say, we're closer to the Trinity Bay. We are not far from Galveston, and we have some good stuff here. And you definitely won't freeze to death here, except for last February we did have a 9-degree day that was awful.
Put on a hoodie. A little bit of a jacket.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's probably warm for you winter, but
it's doable.
But we really thank you so much for being here,
you.
Bruce. And so thank everybody for listening. Please tune back in next week. May the Lord bless you, and we will see you next week. God bless. And okay.
While walking in the woods one day, not so long ago, I saw an old discarded tie from long, long ago. And there in its circle, wildflowers did grow. Bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Tell other people that Jesus loves them so. Tell them how he came to earth and died to set them free. And bloom where you are planted, wherever that might be.